6 months before the end of the First World War, Lily Montague, the young, strong community builder who built up many institutions, including liberal Judaism and the World Union of Progressive Judaism, stood before one of the many congregations she ministered to and answered in her eloquent fashion what is needed for a community to succeed. Her answer: for a community to succeed, it needs individuals. She wrote, "Today we are far less concerned with the emancipation of the brotherhood, that is, the Jewish people, from the oppression of legalism, than we are with the emancipation of the individual soul from the torture of arid negation. The congregation of today is free," she said, "if it is to seize the fruits of its own emancipation, it must gather together the thoughts and aspirations, the character and will, even the doubts and perplexities of each individual member. Individuals who are willing to bring their whole selves, even their doubts and perplexities, into these sacred halls, into relationship with one another." She concluded, "In all the agony of unrest which we are today experiencing, we cling with intense longing to the idea of an eternal God with whom we can have communion, because we, each of us, share God's life and God's nature." This was 6 months before the end of the First World War, but also delivered in the month that the Spanish flu arrived in London. She spoke about the strength of community not being in togetherness, not being in supporting one another and holding each other up, but in the well-being and care of each individual. The question of how do we keep our individual souls from the torture of arid negation, our inner lives from becoming a wasteland, she answers by saying our community must be built up by people being able to enter with their whole selves. One of the most challenging lines in our Torah appears in this week's parashah. It is a line so difficult that, to paraphrase Nachmanides, when Rambam created the list of 613 mitzvot out of the laws of the Torah, thank God he left this line out. We all know the mitzvah, Kirushim Tihiyu, you shall strive for holiness. But this exhortation, which Rabbi Splansky lifted up earlier, which Dahlia read, Tamim Tehiyeh im Adonai Elohecha, you shall be perfect with the eternal your God. By the way, this may not have been in Maimonides' list of 613 commandments, but it was on the executive director job description. Now, in the English, important grammatical points disappear. Kirushim Tihiyu is properly translated as y'all gotta be holy. It's in the plural towards our community as a group. But Tamim Tehiyeh is speaking singularly to you. Not you general, but you, with all your dreams and aspirations, your doubts and perplexities, you must be perfect. I find this line interesting this morning for a number of reasons. Every year when I read through the parashah, Different words speak to me differently. And today when I read this line, I read it as being about each of us striving to uphold a social covenant. For the community to be holy, each individual needs to do their part to stop the spread, lower the curve, get a vaccine to help others have a shot, soon in Canada to vote. Often we think of Judaism, even Canadian progressive Judaism, as about tzimtzum, how the individual must give up their agency, pay taxes, follow laws, in order to uphold our social covenant. We care less about individual success, the rich and the famous blasting off while fires burn below, than about good governance and supporting all elements of society. We celebrate communal achievements, that we were able to have a symposium on anti-Semitism, our new atrium, our community building online in the midst of a pandemic, and we don't often raise up the role of the individual in making this happen. That in order for the Jewish people to be holy, we don't often speak about the role that each and every one of us have in upholding the social covenant. 2 years and 10 months before Lily's sermon, or 106 years ago today, Rabbi Hyman G. Enelo of New York gave a similar message. You shall be perfect with the Lord thy God. At present, we are very likely to think of ethics chiefly in social terms, that one does for one's fellows is apt to form the measure of your character. It is the standard of our sociological age, which looks at outward appearances and external relations. Jewish ethics, however, start with the emphasis on the individual, realizing that without individual perfection, there can be no social progress. You shall be perfect with the eternal your God. All ethics in Israel begin with us. You, I, each of us shall be perfect with the eternal. Honestly, I hear these words and I'm exhausted. It has been a while since things were normal, when I even thought of striving for perfection. As we're planning for the fall right now, even though I've done my part and been vaccinated, here I am being asked questions about our planned opportunities for families with young children to be together safely distanced because another wave is coming. How can there be a place for my doubts and my fears and perplexities in our community? How can I find my place to be myself if each of us are asked for nothing less than perfection? A few moments ago, we looked at the word tihyeh, and now I want to look at that other word, tamim. It could be perfect, simple, wholesome. That's how I often think of it. The translation Rabbi Splansky read is based on reading through the Rashi. Rashi wrote, walk before God wholeheartedly. Put your hope in the eternal. Do not attempt to see into the future, but whatever may be, accept it wholeheartedly. And then you will be with God and become part of God's portion. Our role in community, therefore, is to be fully our best selves, our full selves with faults and doubts. Maybe this exhortation is written in the singular because each of us are different. Although imprinted with the holiness of the divine, the shape and texture of our lives makes it so that perfection is not a universal concept, but one tailored to each of us uniquely. Uniquely, each of us is wholehearted. Each of us is complex. Each of us is enough, however we enter this moment. Rabbi Harold Kushner teaches, that, I believe, is what God asked of Abraham, not tamim, to be perfect, not don't ever make a mistake, but to be whole. To be whole before God means to stand before God with all our faults, as well as with all our virtues, and hear the message of our acceptability. Know what is good and what is evil, and when you do wrong, realize that was not the essential part of you. It was because the challenge of being human is so great that no one gets it right every time. God asks no more of us than that. On this Shabbat, the Shabbat of Judges, Shabbat Shoftim, let us recognize that often the harshest judge is ourselves, but that the first step to building a community that we would want to be part of, is to have the courage to keep stepping forward and to start to again and again bringing ourselves together into sacred community. Shabbat Shalom.